Welcome to the 2023 Mobile Me&You presentation on the technology that brings us today's journalism. We have a wide variety of speakers, 9 speakers from universities, news organizations, and a game organization from across the country, giving you all sorts of perspectives on the tools, the platforms, the tricks that individuals can use in preparing stories to tell, whether that's for their journalism organization, whether it's for their nonprofit, for anybody who has a story to reach a future audience, the young audience, an audience you don't have yet. This is where you learn how to use the new tools to reach those audiences. We'll start off today with Julia Munslow, who's the senior platforms editor at the Wall Street Journal, and she's going to be talking to us about building trust through TikTok. Julia?
Thank you, Gary, and good morning, everyone. So first, I want to start with a question. Influencers or reporters, who do you think has more influence and can command more attention on TikTok? Answer it in your head, and then at the end of the presentation, we're just going to come back to that and see what you all think. So today we're going to be talking about first getting to know the audience. So who are we targeting on TikTok, on off platform, and what do they like? What are they actually paying attention to? Next, we're going to look at influencers and news publishers on TikTok. What are they doing? Is it working? Is it not working? And finally, how journalists can compete with all of this. And then we are going to look to next year. The 2024 election is coming up, as I'm sure all of you know, and I'm predicting that it will be an exciting time on the platform. So first, hi, I am Julia Munslow. My background is in journalism. I started out reporting and content programming, took a year off to teach, so English and journalism lessons. And through my students, I got introduced to short-form vertical video on TikTok and became an avid TikTok viewer myself and a self-taught video editor. And along the way, I played with a lot of algorithms and tried to sort of reverse engineer them to figure out what they were doing. And now I look at audience growth, so focusing on analytics and research on what audiences like and what they need. And then occasionally I also just serve as a human lighter for shots in the newsroom, as you can see up there. So first, how are people accessing news online? So we already know that people prefer social media over news websites, news apps, and this has only grown over time. Younger people especially really prefer social media. They are a lot less likely to go to a desktop website, pick up a print newspaper, or download a news app. However, news avoidance is also on the rise, especially among those younger generations. And it's not really a surprise if you think about what has been going on over the last few years. The COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, now the war in Israel. And if you look at the economy, well, hasn't necessarily all been good news. So TikTok is one of becoming an increasingly used platform as a source of news, right? So if we look at the number of 18 to 24-year-olds who have used any social network in the past week, and this is from the Reuters Digital News Report, we really see that TikTok is starting to grow, as well as Instagram. And these are visual first platforms, right? So at the same time that Instagram and TikTok are growing, we see things like Facebook decreasing, Twitter decreasing a little bit as well. And about 20% of those adults ages 18 to 24 are using TikTok as a source for news. So if we look at TikTok, something that is really important because of how the algorithm works is who commands attention there. As a journalist, as a news organization, you're not only up against other journalists. It's not about, do I follow ABC News or do I follow CBS News? Instead, it's about, can I command attention more than all of the other influencers, the comedians, the entertainers, the celebrities on the platform? So if we're looking at news specifically, about 55% of people who do use TikTok for news are generally paying the most attention to influencers and personalities. So that's not journalists. That's not mainstream news organizations. It's not reporters. And in addition to that, about 44% of people who use TikTok for news are generally paying the most attention to just ordinary people. So folks who don't have that journalism training are not necessarily verifying their information, but instead are just talking about news on the platform. And so I wanted to take a look at what some successful influencers are doing on the platform. So here on the right, we have Josh Helfgott. He has a whole segment called Gay News, where he talks about what's happening in the news through the lens of being a gay man, really pulls out any threads that are related to LGBTQ news, and talks about that to his audience of 5.5 million followers on the platform. Next, we have Vivian Tu, whose handle is Your Rich BFF. She talks a lot about financial news, so news you can use, service journalism, what to do about student loans, what credit card you should open, all of those things. Next, we have V. Spehar, who is Under the Desk News, and they really focus on delivering the news in a sort of gentle way, a very empathetic way. Their first video, they got under a desk, literally crawled under a desk, and started talking about the news in a really calm, gentle, accessible way to their audience of 3 million followers. And then finally, we have Crime with Court. So it might not surprise anyone to know that true crime is a really, really popular genre of news on the platform, and there are really very few professional journalists doing it. Most of the true crime we see on TikTok is actually through the eyes of people who love true crime themselves, and follow cold cases, follow things that are unfolding in real time on the platform. So here are a few examples of what they are doing to sort of, pull attention, not necessarily away from news organizations, but they're certainly commanding a lot of attention on the platform. So this one is Josh. This is one of his gay news segments.
Breaking gay news, Kentucky is arresting trans people and trans allies right now. Literally, as they're being arrested, one lawmaker gave one of the most powerful speeches I've ever heard.
First you hated black people, then you hated Jews. Now you're hating everybody when you hate yourself. This house is for the people, by the people, to serve the people, and you after everybody's kids but your own. None of us said we would come here and hurt people. You make hate. Somebody's gonna have to told. Yes, the gentleman from that.
So obviously a very different way of delivering that news than you might expect from a traditional news organization, but the content is all still there, right? You have a host, you have an anchor, you have a clip from someone who is there on the scene showing you what was said by a prominent lawmaker. And next we have Vivian Tu. So she's doing GameStop, Reddit, and the market explained in 60 seconds.
All right, Money Talk. Here's the 60 seconds on what is going on with GameStop, Reddit, and the market. Essentially, a bunch of regular people have made a ginormous bet against financial institutions, and they're currently winning. We're watching one of the largest wealth transfers from Wall Street to Main Street, so obviously it's all anybody can talk about. Essentially, a bunch of Redditors analyzed GameStop stock and felt like it was undervalued. They also identified a major weakness in the strategies used by giant hedge funds, believing that GME would fail.
And then finally, this is one of the true crime videos.
After 65 long years, the identity of the boy in the box has officially been confirmed. On February 25, 1957, a little boy between the ages of 3 and 7 was found murdered and stuffed inside of a bassinet box on the side of the road in Pennsylvania. He had been wrapped in a plaid blanket, was malnourished, and had suffered extreme physical abuse prior to his death. His cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma, but the odd part is that he appeared to be clean and freshly groomed with a haircut and even had trimmed fingernails. Authorities took the boy's fingerprints and discovered a lot of clues left behind at the crime scene.
So again, these are all things that you would see in the news already. These influencers are just choosing to deliver them in a very, very different way from what we might see from a traditional news organization. But all of the content is still there. Vivian's video is essentially an explainer. We do those all the time. And then if you look at Court's video on the right, It's essentially a TikTok of what has unfolded in this case. Again, something you would probably see in your local news. So that brings me to what are news publishers doing on the platform today. When you look at news publishers, generally speaking, they're somewhere on the spectrum from brand-led to creator-led. So news publishers are taking very, very different approaches to how they're presenting the news on TikTok. Some of them, like ABC News, have so much video footage already, right? They're a TV station, and they just have a ton of video readily available at their disposal. And so ABC is an example of a very brand-led news account where they really just focus on what they've already done on platform, so what they're already showing on their newscasts.
Developments overnight in Israel. The militant group Hamas firing thousands of rockets into the country. Smoke and flames seen rising from multiple sites that were hit.
The death toll is rising. Israelis seen taking cover as sirens wailed across the country. Israel declaring a state of war, saying a number of Hamas militants have infiltrated the country from the Gaza Strip.
Prime Minister.
So this is something that, it appeared on ABC News as is. Horizontal videos are becoming increasingly popular on TikTok as well, which makes news organizations' jobs a lot easier if they're trying to adapt them for social. Next up, we have Morning Brew, which is a publication that focuses a lot on business. They chose to take a very creator-led approach to this platform, and they mostly distilled the news by creating these short, humorous skits that talk about things that are in the news that they're covering in one of their newsletters.
Okay, cool. Gonna get our taxes done. First form, basic salary stuff.
Okay, I'm on the part about stolen property. What do you think? I'd say I bring home about $50 in snacks and office supplies a week.
What are you talking about?
Free groceries, the return to office tax. Am I the only one that's been doing this?
Yes.
Come on, you haven't stolen anything? No illegal income?
No, not really.
What about your PPP scam?
Duh, I reported that when I filed for 2020.
Okay, well, I know the watch you wear is stolen.
Fine, what about your underground fight club? I know you get membership fees.
Yeah, I should probably report the cash they bring in from extorting local businesses too.
Wait, do I have to report illegal income that I've already laundered into something else?
What about stolen items that I already sold on Depop?
Wait a second. What if we just didn't report the income that we made from our crimes?
Dan, don't be stupid. That would be illegal.
So they are very popular on TikTok, which probably wouldn't surprise anyone. One of the potential downsides, though, of having this creator-led approach is what happens if one of those people leaves, right? It makes it a lot harder for Morning Brew to maintain its popularity on the platform, especially since TikTok is visual first. So you're seeing the faces before you really see any brand names. And then finally, we have NPR. They launched their TikTok somewhat recently, and they sort of do this mix of creator-led and brand-led with the focus on in-the-field reporting. And the tone of these videos, too, if you're an NPR listener, it probably will feel pretty NPR to you.
This is the third dishwasher we've had in less than a year. The owners never fix it when it's broken. They just replace it. Maybe because manufacturers often require repairs to be done by an authorized technician. And who authorizes those technicians? The manufacturer. Many won't even sell parts or tools to a consumer or an independent repair shop. So, should they have to? That's what right to repair laws address.
So interestingly, NPR is taking all of its radio hosts and telling them, hey, you now have to get on camera even though you work in radio. But they're doing a really great job of it. They make sure that they have the NPR branding pretty prominently without being overwhelming in these videos too. So what does this all mean for journalists as creators, journalists who are trying to create content on these platforms? So here is what I think that journalists can learn from these influencers. There are a lot of lessons that we can take from the creator economy. The first of which being, connect with your audience. Think about what your audience actually wants, what they actually need. Take the time to understand them and be relatable. People who are especially those in Gen Z, especially those who are millennial, they want to listen to people who are relatable to them. They want to feel as though they're talking more so to a friend, maybe someone that they have some sort of parasocial relationship with, than turning on the TV and watching a news anchor. And second, explaining the news in terms that your audience both enjoys and understands. Obviously, this is not going to be the case for every single piece of news, but if there's a way to inject a little bit of your personality into a video explaining what's going on in the markets, why not? That not only allows your audience to connect with you, but it also helps you stand out a little bit more. And again, on TikTok, on social platforms, you're competing not only against other news organizations, but against all of those influencers, celebrities, creators. And then, keeping it short and sweet. TikTok did recently announce that we will be able to upload 30-minute videos. However, generally speaking, the videos that we see as being the most successful are under a minute, if not under 30 seconds. Why would I spend my time scrolling? If I'm scrolling through TikTok, why would you spend your time watching a 10-minute video explaining the markets when you could instead watch a 30-second funny skit about it, right? And then finally, and this goes back to the first point, allowing yourself to be human. A lot of the people on TikTok are, who are successful influencers, have really figured out how to connect with their audience and make it seem as though they're friends. They are showing the less glossy side of their lives. They're not necessarily posting the perfectly photoshopped pictures that you would see on Instagram or even Facebook, but instead they're embracing sort of the chaos that exists in everyone's daily lives and showing it for everyone. And of course, as journalists, there is a fine line to walk here, and there's a balance that we need to be aware of. But again, when you have those opportunities, I would encourage people to take them. And so that brings me to the Journal and how we as a legacy print news organization took on TikTok. So this is how we approach the platform. First, we have a dedicated core team that includes both TikTok specialists, so people who are trained in short-form vertical video editing and really understand the platform, the trends, and the algorithm, and a team of social media experts who can work across platforms. And these people produce the majority of our videos. So that means that we are not serving as coaches for people who are going on camera, but we're also writing scripts, we're editing videos, we are putting finishing touches on things, including captions, and we are making sure that all of the videos feel cohesive and appropriate for a place like the Journal. Next, we do a lot of newsroom collaborations, and this is something that I'm really proud of. So the Journal has a pretty large newsroom. We have bureaus all over the world, and what we've been able to do is hold a lot of trainings to coach reporters and editors to host videos, to film B-roll when they're on the ground. And we hold these both in person and remotely. And this allows us to be really smart about the curation that we do in terms of where we are putting our efforts, in terms of what sort of videos that we're able to put on the channel. So for example, we have folks on the West Coast who have sent us video. We had a reporter go on a whitewater rafting trip for a story, and he filmed the entire trip for us. And from that, we were able to cut together a video. And so really just collaborating across the newsroom, making sure people are empowered and that they have the training that it takes to put together one of these videos. Next up, we try and keep our tone really intentional. So this is something that when we were setting strategy for the account, we thought a lot about. So how do you balance a sort of more straightforward delivery with that sense of humor that millennials and Gen Z really want to see from folks on TikTok? So we thought a lot about what we were going to do, how we were going to come across. Obviously, not every news story is an appropriate contender for a skit. And similarly, there are some really funny news stories out there that are probably better done as skits than as, a straightforward talking head sort of video. And then finally, we thought a lot about safety. So this included both building in digital safety precautions and making sure people who are on camera were really comfortable. Because if there's anything that I think anyone can spot, it's when someone is on camera and they're feeling a little awkward. They don't necessarily want to be there, right? So making sure that people felt really empowered, really confident, and this included a lot of coaching, a lot of training for the people in our newsroom. So here are some of our recent videos that I think really exemplify, one, what we're trying to do, and two, have performed pretty strongly for us. So you may all remember the news story about the lost Titan submersible earlier this year. So when we were thinking about how to put this on TikTok, first, it was one of those stories that sort of took over the internet, right? You could not escape it. If you're on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, it was everywhere. And so we looked at all of the coverage that was out there and said, okay, what can we do as the Journal that other news organizations can't? And so one of the graphics reporters on our team came up with this graphic of what it was actually like inside the sub. And so what we did is we said, hey, that's a great graphic. We're going to take this and turn it into a video, and this is what we did.
Let's look inside the missing Titan submersible. The Titan fits up to 5 people who have to sit due to a low roof. The pilot tracks position, oxygen levels, and communications via video monitors, and uses a video game controller to steer. This section swings out as a door and has a roughly 20-inch window that lets passengers see outside. And there's also a small toilet in the front with a curtain.
So all we did there was take an existing graphic that appeared on site and put it off platform into a short form vertical video. This video is our most highly viewed video of all time at 20 million views. And most of those views happened within a 48-hour period. And then next up, this next one is a collaboration with our enterprise team. So we came, the Journal's reporters got this footage of a Russian draftee basically surrendering to Ukraine.
This Russian draftee was being hunted by Ukrainian drones dropping small bombs. Using hand signals, he proposed a messaging system to the drone pilots. He asked them to spare his life. Drones guided him through the perilous terrain toward Ukrainian-held territory. He is now being held at a detention facility in the Kharkiv region.
So the full video that we got was a lot longer than what you just saw. And so our challenge was actually, how do you distill a, like 10 minutes of footage down into 15, 20 seconds. And so we worked really closely with the enterprise team to pick out the key moments and then cut something together that felt true to the story while also, keeping it as short as possible. And next up, this is maybe one of my favorite videos that we've ever done. So we knew that Trump was probably going to get indicted again earlier this spring. And that indictment was the one that was related to Stormy Daniels and the hush money payment. And that's a story that the Journal broke. So what we did is we went to our investigations editor, Mike Sikanoffi, and said, hey, can you walk us through all of your reporting from that story in 60 seconds? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So we were able to take his notes, take what we knew about the story, where it was likely headed, and create this video.
Donald Trump just became the first U.S. president ever to be indicted. We'll tell you how we got here. In 2018, the Wall Street Journal revealed that Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, made a secret $130,000 payoff to a porn star, Stormy Daniels, just before the 2016 election. The agreement prevented Daniels from publicly disclosing anything about an alleged sexual encounter she had with Trump. As we pursued the investigation, we interviewed dozens of people, we looked at corporate records, court papers, and other documents, and what we found is that Trump had personally orchestrated a scheme to suppress these allegations, and including a separate $150,000 payoff to a former Playboy model by the name of Karen McDougal. This reporting raised the real possibility that Trump could have violated federal campaign finance law. The Journal coverage led to a federal hush money investigation in 2018, and later that year, Cohen, Trump's lawyer, pleaded guilty to federal campaign finance violations and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Later, state prosecutors at the New York DA's office picked up the investigation and presented evidence starting this January to a grand jury. That grand jury has voted to indict Trump. Trump has denied wrongdoing and has said that the charges are political. And of course, they'd have to be proven in court. But why this matters is Trump is running for president next year, and this case could factor into that race.
So Mike is great on camera. That was, something that I think we've learned as we've been going across the newsroom is even people who you might not necessarily expect to be TikTok stars can turn out to be TikTok stars. So don't discount anyone, including yourself. So the Journal also holds a variety of in-person conferences, including one called The Future of Everything. And this includes a lot of demos, a lot of new tech that's out there. And so we thought what better way to spend our time at the conference than showing everyone all of this new tech and what it might bring?
This is an airless basketball, and this is me messing around, for science. The prototype from Wilson Sporting Goods has the size, weight, and bounce of a regulation ball, though in my test I found it lacked the softness of traditional leather. Their rep told me it could hit stores sometime in the next year.
So that was Jacob O'Hara, who's one of our visuals producers. He's really good at balancing, sort of like showing people what's going on while injecting a little bit of his personality into these videos. And this video was at over, I think it was over like 4 million views the last time we looked. And then next up, this is another favorite of mine. So one of our White House reporters, Sabrina Siddiqui, went on a trip with President Biden to Ukraine. And it was a really top secret trip. She could only tell like 2 people about it. One of them was her editor. The other person was her husband. And at the time, she's also a new mother. So she has to pump breast milk somehow on this clandestine, top secret, heavily, guarded trip. And so what she did for us is she said, let's open the reporter's notebook. I'm going to give you my first person point of view of what this was like for me.
Here's what it's like to go on a top secret trip with the president. I'm a White House reporter, and last month I went on a top secret trip to Ukraine with President Biden. I was sworn to secrecy. I could only tell my husband and one editor at the Journal, and my phone was confiscated for almost the entire trip. We flew to Poland, and we took the train into Ukraine, where Biden met with President Zelensky. But for me, there was this whole other layer. It was my first work trip after maternity leave, and I needed to be able to pump breast milk for my baby. Thankfully, both the White House comms director and the president of the White House Correspondents Association are also working moms. And so before I even knew about the trip, they had been working on a plan for pumping in a war zone. On the way home, I tweeted this photo, and the response was overwhelming. Another journalist said it showed just how much had changed since she and other working moms had to hide while pumping or risk losing out on assignments. When my daughter is old enough, I hope what she takes away is what working moms are capable of and just how much having them in the room matters.
And this was one of those TikTok videos where I think almost every single comment was positive. People were saying how cool it was to sort of see behind the scenes. They were saying how cool it was that she was a new mom going on this trip. And there were a lot of other working moms in the comments saying, I'm so glad that you shared this. It was really, really cool to hear about it from your perspective. So an opportunity to pull back the curtain, to show people, sort of what's going on behind the scenes. These are details that they might not have found out otherwise, but Sabrina was generous enough to share. Okay, so all this brings me to 2024, and what does this mean for political coverage on TikTok? So first off, I want to go back to 2020. So I covered the 2020 election, so this is during the pandemic, while I was at Yahoo News. And during that time, we built our TikTok account, which was at 1 million followers in under a year through political moments. So what we really saw is that we saw our biggest growth through these big breaking news moments that sort of everyone was talking about. So that included convention speeches, debates, so key moments, everything including something that Biden or Trump was saying that really made news, to even if you remember the fly that appeared on Mike Pence's head. That was a fun TikTok video for us. And then the week that was when we were waiting to hear the election results, people really wanted to know, when are we going to find out who won? Why is it taking so long? What does it all mean? And answering audience questions in that way. And then finally, when we were covering January 6th, we had a White House reporter on the ground who was able to feed us footage from what was going on at the Capitol. And in the 48 hours that transpired after January 6th, we saw an increase in account growth of 250,000 followers just in that 48-hour period. So looking to 2024, this is sort of what I am thinking we're going to see on the platform. So really a big one is explainers and fact-checking. I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of deep fakes, a lot of misinformation, especially as more people get access to AI tools, right? We're already seeing deepfakes of President Obama going around. So what does this mean for deepfakes that are going to start popping up of Biden, of Trump, of other candidates on the campaign trail? And how are we going to get ahead of that on social, especially? People are also really going to want to see what's happening on the campaign trail. So 2020, pandemic year, things are a little bit less crazy, a little bit less in person. This year, people are out and about again, right? So I want to see what's happening as it's happening in places that I can't be myself. So show me the unfiltered, raw footage. Show me what's going on the ground. And lastly, this is another thing that we saw a lot of success with when I was at Yahoo is voter perspectives. What are other people talking about? What are people in other parts of the country talking about? People who are in red states, people who are in blue states, purple states. What are they actually caring about? And what are these ordinary people's opinions on what's going on? And so I also just wanted to talk about politics on TikTok. So this is sort of the format that I would imagine might start to become increasingly popular as we are seeing more political pundits pop up on TikTok. Right now, there aren't too many that are active. Of course, there are some, but during the 2020 election, we really saw a lot of young political pundits talk on TikTok about what was going on in the race, what they cared about, where they thought things ought to go. And so this first example is actually something we did when I was at Yahoo. And I think it just goes to show that, again, these videos can be very short, they can be very simple, and they also should always be highly visual.
This is the moment, tonight is the night, we'll fight till it's over, so we put our hands up like the ceiling can hold us.
So that's just a time lapse of the election map and how it turned out. But that video did really well for us. I think it's over 1 million views at this point. And then I also just wanted to highlight Jeff Jackson, who is a Democratic congressman from North Carolina. He is extremely popular on TikTok, and he breaks down what's going on in Congress for not only his constituents, right, but pretty much everyone who's on TikTok.
For the first time ever in American history, the Speaker of the House has been fired. We just took the vote. I just left the Capitol, and here's what I saw. When I walked through the doors of the House chamber and onto the floor for the vote, the first thing I saw was about 200 reporters up in the gallery. That's not normal. Then they banged the gavel and brought us into session, and everybody sat down and got really quiet. That's not normal either. The thing is, no matter how long any of these people have served in Congress, none of them have ever seen this happen before.
So he goes on to explain what happened with McCarthy in the news recently, but he's able to really inject some of that personality in there. He's talking about it in a really, really accessible way, right? He's giving you context while telling you what's happening and saying, you know, this thing happened, but it's not normal. And this was also what I saw, but it's also not normal. And here's why it is such a big deal. And so I would expect an increasing number of people to be, maybe they're not going to be on TikTok, right? But they'll be on other social platforms doing things sort of like this. And that is it for me. So thank you so much. And let me know if you have any questions.
So many of the who are getting news on TikTok, getting it from.
Yeah.
What's the, how do you control the point of view? Oh, thank you. Okay, so with so many people getting their news on TikTok from influencers, those influencers are basically mediating it from a news organization.
Yes.
So do you think that the audience understands that news is mediated and therefore might have a point of view in it?
Yeah, no, I think they do understand that, but I think they also would rather hear it from this influencer than someone working at the news organization. And while that might sound like bad news for journalists, I think what it really does is it shows us that there's a huge opening there for journalists to come in and start emulating some of those techniques.
Okay, and to be influencers.
Yeah, well, journalists are influencers already, right? We're all constantly creating content. I think people look at influencer and they have certain notions about it, but at the end of the day, we're all telling stories and we're all trying to connect with our audience and explain to them what's going on. And if that's not an influencer, I don't know what is.
I hope I'm not veering into the dumb question area here.
Never.
Revenue stream. Is there a revenue stream from appearing on TikTok and other social media, knowing that, the Wall Street Journal has a paywall on its website and the newspapers themselves are not free?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for us, we see our TikTok primarily as a relationship building account. So that means we have a link in our bio that people can go to. Our paywall is also pretty dynamic in that if you haven't spent a lot of time on our site, then your first article is probably free. That said, what other people are doing, what other folks are doing on TikTok does allow them to make money. So if you look at the Washington Post, they have videos that are essentially ads that are sponsored by other companies. The editorial team doesn't touch them, to my knowledge, and they just sort of appear on the account and they're able to create a revenue stream there. You also are able to get money from TikTok as a platform. It's not that much, but it is something. And if you're cross-posting these videos, which is what the Journal does, right? We put them on Snapchat, we put them on Instagram. That only expands your potential for revenue of some sort. Does that answer the question?
Do you think that social media is both a curse and a blessing? Giving them misinformation, disinformation, fake news. Like, what's your opinion on that?
That is a great question. I mean, I think how I see it is, my job as a journalist is to inform people. And so that involves, in my opinion, going to where people are. So I think that being a journalist, we should be reaching out to audiences. We don't necessarily have to wait for them to come to us. Part of our job is to build that relationship. And I think social media does allow us to do that. That said, as you very smartly pointed out, there is so much misinformation out there, and that makes our jobs tougher. But, there have always been people who are spreading information that is not accurate. I don't think that's new to us. I think that is just something that with social media, with technology, we now have to adapt how we can combat that and fight that.
Thank you.
I was just curious, given the controversy around TikTok itself as a platform,
Totally.
Potential cybersecurity threats or perceptions of ties to the Chinese government. Was there much debate internally at the Wall Street Journal whether to embrace TikTok?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't speak too much about the internal discussions, but I will say when we're working with reporters across the newsroom, especially reporters who are dealing with any sort of sensitive information, we always tell them, we can do this all off platform for you, in the sense that we tell, they don't have to download TikTok to be on our TikTok. We're able to film them in other ways, shapes and forms. And of course, we're always keeping an eye to what is happening. But I think part of why our strategy is successful is because obviously, we are creating videos for TikTok and trying to ensure that they feel native to the platform. But we're also posting these videos across our other platforms. So, for instance, I recently produced a video with one of our reporters who spoke about or did a story about J.M. Smucker's return to office plan and why people like it so much. And we were able to use that footage not only on TikTok, but also in an Instagram reel and a Google web story, tappable story that appears on Google. And so we're really, expanding what we're doing. So it's a little bit less tied to any particular platform. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of the conference.